On June 29, 2012, electrical grids across the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic operated under standard summer load patterns. Urban tree canopies in Chicago, Columbus, Washington, D.C., and dozens of smaller municipalities had matured over decades without major wind damage. Thunderstorm wind events in the region typically produced isolated gusts below severe criteria, rarely sustaining intensity across multiple states. Emergency management systems anticipated brief localized outages and heat-related stress during the ongoing warm period. No regional warnings suggested coordinated infrastructure exposure. The North American grid maintained interconnection protocols designed for independent system failures, not simultaneous collapse across a 700-mile corridor. Summer electrical demand across the Midwest reached seasonal peaks as temperatures exceeded 95 degrees Fahrenheit in multiple metropolitan areas. Transmission infrastructure supporting Columbus, Ohio, Washington, D.C., and intermediate urban centers operated near capacity. Urban forest coverage in these regions averaged 30 to 40% canopy density, with mature deciduous trees positioned along residential streets and utility corridors. Power distribution networks utilized above-ground lines in suburban zones and underground systems in dense commercial districts. Tree root systems had established decades of growth without recent exposure to sustained straight-line wind forces. Grid operators coordinated reserve capacity across regional transmission organizations. Standard thunderstorm protocols assumed brief wind events affecting individual counties rather than multi-state simultaneous loading. Atmospheric conditions on June 29 produced extreme instability across northern Indiana and Illinois. Surface temperatures reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while mid-level winds exceeded 50 knots. A mesoscale convective system formed along a frontal boundary during afternoon heating. Initial thunderstorm cells merged into a linear bow echo structure by early evening. The system organized rapidly, with reflectivity signatures indicating embedded downbursts. Forward propagation speed reached 60 miles per hour as the convective line maintained intensity. The derecho structure, defined by continuous damaging winds over 250 miles, established itself before crossing into Ohio. Rear inflow jets fed the system with mid-level dry air, sustaining downdraft intensity. By 1900 UTC, the line extended over 200 miles north to south, with embedded wind maxima exceeding 80 miles per hour. Derecho classification requires wind damage extending more than 250 miles, with wind gusts exceeding 58 miles per hour along most of the path. The June 29 system exceeded these criteria by 2000 UTC. Forward speed accelerated to 70 miles per hour across Ohio, maintaining organized bow echo structure. Wind field continuity persisted for over 10 hours across changing terrain and atmospheric conditions. The system tracked from northern Illinois through Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, and into the Mid-Atlantic, traveling over 700 miles. Peak wind gusts reached 91 miles per hour in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and 80 miles per hour in Columbus, Ohio. The derecho maintained severe wind production across the entire corridor without significant weakening. Atmospheric conditions supported continuous convective regeneration along the leading edge throughout the evening and overnight hours. Initial infrastructure damage appeared in northern Indiana and Illinois between 1800 and 1900 UTC. Wind gusts exceeding 70 miles per hour downed transmission towers and snapped distribution poles. Tree failures occurred across residential areas, with large branches and whole trees impacting power lines. The South Bend and Fort Wayne regions reported widespread outages, affecting over 200,000 customers within the first hour. Emergency response systems activated severe thunderstorm protocols, deploying crews to assess damage zones. Outage restoration timelines assumed isolated damage clusters rather than continuous corridor collapse. By 2000 UTC, damage reports extended across the entire width of Indiana. Communication systems experienced overload as call volumes exceeded capacity. Initial casualty reports included wind-related injuries from falling trees and structural debris. The system entered Ohio at 2030 UTC, maintaining forward speed near 70 miles per hour. Wind damage intensified across the Columbus metropolitan area between 2100 and 2130 UTC. Sustained winds exceeded 70 miles per hour for over 30 minutes, affecting urban and suburban infrastructure simultaneously. The derecho crossed into West Virginia and Virginia by 2300 UTC, continuing eastward without weakening. Atmospheric instability remained sufficient to support convective intensity despite nighttime cooling. The system reached the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area shortly after midnight on June 30. Peak wind gusts in the capital region exceeded 80 miles per hour. The derecho maintained organized structure through Maryland and into Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Total event duration exceeded 12 hours with continuous severe wind production. Forward motion prevented local storm regeneration from dissipating the linear structure. Power grid failures cascaded across the corridor as wind damage accumulated. Transmission lines supporting Columbus experienced multiple tower failures, isolating substations from generation sources. The Washington, D.C. metro area lost power to over 1 million customers within 2 hours. Distribution networks collapsed as tree impacts exceeded system capacity for damage absorption. Substation equipment sustained direct wind damage requiring replacement rather than repair. The PJM interconnection reported unprecedented simultaneous loading across member utilities. Reserve capacity protocols could not address coordinated multi-state outages. Underground systems in urban cores remained functional, but above-ground distribution networks failed across suburban zones. Grid operators implemented emergency load shedding to prevent cascading transmission failures. Total outages peaked at over 4 million customers across 10 states and the District of Columbia. Emergency response systems encountered operational constraints as damage scope became apparent. The ongoing heat wave produced ambient temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit across the impact corridor. Hospitals activated backup generation while municipal cooling centers lost power. Emergency call centers received volumes exceeding capacity by factors of 10. Utility crews faced debris-blocked roads and damage densities preventing rapid assessment. The National Guard deployed to assist with debris clearance and traffic control. Medical facilities treated over 1,000 wind-related injuries, including trauma from falling trees and structural collapse. Heat-related illness reports increased as power outages eliminated air conditioning across residential areas. Water treatment facilities operated on backup power with uncertain fuel supplies. Transportation networks experienced signal failures and blocked roadways, requiring coordinated clearance operations across multiple jurisdictions. The derecho affected over 10 million people across the impact corridor. 22 fatalities occurred, primarily from falling trees and structural failures. Over 1,000 individuals sustained injuries requiring medical treatment. Property damage estimates exceeded $2.9 billion, including residential, commercial, and infrastructure losses. Power restoration required up to 2 weeks in the most severely damaged zones. Tree debris removal operations continued for months across urban areas. Agricultural losses included damaged crops and destroyed outbuildings across the Midwest. Transportation disruptions affected regional commerce and commuting patterns. The event occurred during a multi-day heat wave, compounding health impacts in areas without power. Insurance claims processing identified over 500,000 damaged or destroyed structures. The storm's rapid forward motion prevented advance warning beyond standard severe thunderstorm notifications issued minutes before arrival. Utility companies deployed crews from unaffected regions to accelerate restoration operations. Debris clearance became the rate-limiting factor for power restoration in heavily forested areas. Transmission infrastructure required engineered rebuilds rather than temporary repairs. Municipal operations focused on establishing cooling centers and distributing emergency supplies. Tree removal contractors worked continuously across multiple states for weeks following the event. Grid operators analyzed failure modes to identify vulnerabilities in interconnected systems. Heat-related mortality increased in the days following the derecho due to prolonged power outages. Federal emergency declarations enabled resource coordination across state boundaries. Complete restoration required replacement of thousands of distribution poles and miles of conductor. Some remote areas remained without power for over 3 weeks. The Storm Prediction Center classified the event as a progressive derecho based on wind damage extent and duration. The system ranked among the most destructive convective wind events in U.S. history by affected population and economic impact. NOAA analysis identified the event as meeting all derecho criteria with extraordinary forward speed and intensity persistence. The National Weather Service issued over 600 severe thunderstorm warnings along the derecho's path. Post-event analysis examined bow-echo maintenance mechanisms and atmospheric conditions supporting such long-lived systems. Electric utility industry reviews identified above-ground infrastructure vulnerability to sustained wind events. The event contributed to discussions of grid-hardening investments and vegetation management protocols. Scientific literature examined mesoscale processes enabling derecho propagation across diverse terrain. The 2012 derecho established reference standards for convective wind hazard assessment.